Alright, so now you should have a picture of your sketch on your computer by using some sort of cloud storage software like Dropbox or Google Drive to get it onto your computer, or by simply sending it to yourself as an attachment in an email and then just saving it to your desktop. As you can see, I have a photo of my sketch on my desktop that's ready to be image traced in Adobe Illustrator. However, before I go into Illustrator, I like to go into Photoshop first in order to fix up the image so it's a little bit easier to work with in Illustrator. So what you can do is just go over to your image, right click on it, and then click Open With and Adobe Photoshop. Or you could just open up Photoshop first, click File, Open, or Command or Control O, and then just find your photo and it should open up like this. Now the first thing I like to do is to crop the image in order to get rid of the unnecessary areas of the image so I can just focus on fixing up the parts that really matter, which are my sketch. So what you can do is locate the Tools panel, which should be on the left side of your screen, and you can see all these different tools that you can use, and this square box should be the crop tool, or you could just press the keyboard shortcut key, that is the letter C, and when you select that you should have this box around your image, and then you can simply drag the edges and the corners in to crop the image. So I'm going to get rid of all the wood part of this image so I can only focus on the paper and the sketch. So I think I like that. So once you have it, then you could just double click on the image and it will crop it. Now if you wanted to fix that crop, you could just simply click anywhere on that image with the crop tool and it'll bring it up, and it should still have that unless you have deleted or delete cropped pixels selected, which I don't believe is default. So unless you want this to be deleted, I would just keep it unchecked, and that way you can edit it later. So we're just going to double click again, and that's going to reset our crop. Now normally you should have your sketch in black ink on white paper if you plan on doing the image trace inside Adobe Illustrator. However, I didn't end up actually using image trace for this particular geofilter, so it's still in a pencil form. So it's going to be a little bit harder to do an image trace without doing some corrections to the image. So if you happen to just have pencil, I'm going to show you how you can turn it into looking like it was inked, or just basically making it look black on white. And what you can do is by adding an adjustment layer, or you could simply go to Image, Adjustments, and then Levels, or you could use the keyboard shortcut Command L or Control L if you're on a PC. However, that way doesn't work as well, because if you use this way, it's going to add this adjustment to the image itself rather than on a new layer. And this can be a little bit challenging to edit later on. So what we can do is exit out of that and then go over to this panel that says Adjustments. And if you don't happen to see this panel, you could go to Window and go down to Adjustments and just make sure that it's checked. And you should be able to see this box that says Adjustments. And if you click Levels, then it's going to add a new layer, as you can see on this in this Layers panel. And so this way, if we wanted to change it, we could just toggle this on and off, or make edits to the adjustment layer without affecting the actual image. So we can start by bringing in the black slider towards the middle to increase the darkness of the blacks and the dark grays. We want to make it as dark as possible, and as you can see, the background is starting to get a little bit too dark, so we're going to bring in the midtones closer towards the middle, and we could bring in the whites a little bit, and just make it as close as possible. So that's looking pretty good. We see that there's a little bit of white spots where there was pencil texture. So what we can do is then close out of this properties panel and then go over to the paintbrush tool. So we could click on the paintbrush tool, and then over here make sure that the foreground color is black. You can just select this option, and then you can go over here, click on top of your image, and then select new layer, and make sure that it's on top of that image. If it's not, you could just simply drag it above the image. And then we're going to zoom in, and you can see that there's a lot of this texture. Now you may want to keep this texture if you're going for more of a hand-drawn look, but there's some things that you may want to fix. So we can go and fix that with the paintbrush tool. And so you can just adjust the size of your paintbrush by clicking the brackets left or right to increase or decrease. And then we can go in and zoom in on this. Let's say we want this stem to be a little bit cleaner. So what we'll do is then just draw some black right there just to fill that in. And we could do it over here as well, just to keep that edge. We'll keep the middle just because we want to keep a little bit of that texture, since we're going for a hand-drawn look. And we could go for this leaf up here too. Follow up along these edges to make it a little bit cleaner, because if it's a little rough, you may want to have a little bit of a cleaner edge to the edges of your design. And as you can see, there's some reds and some yellows coming up in the design. If you want to just get rid of that, if it's bothering you for some reason, you can go ahead and get a hue or saturation adjustment in the adjustments panel, and just click on that, and you could bring this slider that says saturation all the way to the left, and as you can see, it's getting rid of all that. And now you can actually see that some of those colors are turning into grays, and you may want to go back to that layer that we just created. We'll name it our paintbrush strokes. And you may see some grays around here, like right there. These shouldn't be too much of a problem, but if you see that they're coming a little bit dark, then you can go over to your paintbrush palette, and you could switch the color from black to white. If you don't want to have that gray show up, then you could paint with white on the edges, and that will help make sure that it doesn't show up in the image trace. Now for this S, we could switch the colors from white to black, and then fill this in to fix up that edge. Alright, so now that you have edited that, and once you get to a point where it feels like it's pretty good, then you could go ahead and save this by going to File, Export, and then Export As. And then you can go to Export All, and then just save it to your desktop as a new image. And it should be another JPEG. You could just rename it, or you can save it over the old one if you'd like. And then we can go over to Adobe Illustrator, go to File, New, and then the dimensions for a geofilter would be, the width would be 1080 pixels, and the height would be 1920 pixels. And should be RGB color mode. Raster effects could be 300, and the orientation should be vertical, should be in pixels, and it should be good to go. Then click OK. And you should have this, and what you can do is then go to File, Place, or Command Shift P or Control Shift P if you're on a PC, and this should be able to find your geofilter from your sketch image that we just edited from your desktop. Go ahead and open that and click Place, and you should have this, and what you can do is then just click and drag until you fill the space you want it, and then it should be placed in there as an image. Now with this image, you can then click on this image, make sure that it's selected, and you should be able to see the word image, the button image trace at the top part of the menu bar. And then from the drop down menu next to the image trace button, you can see a number of presets that you can select that will automatically generate an image trace, but we are going to select just the image trace button. So it looks like it did do the image trace, however there's some key settings that don't show up right away when you click the image trace button, and you want to go over to the image trace panel towards the left, and it should be this icon that says image trace panel, and then this should pop up a box with all the settings that you'll need to set the correct settings for your image trace. The first setting is going to be threshold. The threshold sets what would be considered black in the image. Everything that is black is going to turn into a shape, so by increasing the threshold, you're going to pick up more blacks and grays in the photos, which will then turn into shapes. Now we already did a really good job of getting rid of a lot of those gray areas in Photoshop with our image. However, just to give a little bit of an example, if I increase the threshold of this image, it's going to bring out a lot of those medium grays and turn them into complete shapes. And of course we don't want that, so that's what it looks like if you have your threshold really high. If you want to decrease the threshold, just bring it down. It's going to get rid of a lot of those shapes and make it a little bit more readable. And if we bring it down all the way towards the bottom, you'll start to see that there's more white areas within the S and part of the lettering because those were a little bit more gray. So we'll bring this back, and I like to keep it around 128, and from there we're going to go to the advanced settings. The first advanced setting is paths, and paths basically determine how much detail will be picked up in the sketch and how many anchor points will be created as a result. So you want there to be enough of the paths to have enough detail to where it doesn't look lopsided. However, you may not want to have a lot of anchor points in paths just because it can become very hard to edit later if it's too detailed, because you'll have to manually adjust those anchor points and it could be kind of time consuming. Next is corners, and corners basically determine the sharpness and smoothness of the anchor points and paths on your sketch. So by increasing this, you're increasing the sharpness, and by decreasing it, you're making it a little bit more smooth. Lastly is noise, and this setting is used to decrease the amount of noise in your sketch by ignoring certain parts of your areas of a specified size. So by setting this, you're setting the pixel range that's acceptable in. So by increasing this, you're decreasing the amount of noise, and if you're decreasing it, then you are increasing the amount of noise. So those are a few of the advanced settings. I like to keep them as is, but they're good to keep in mind when your sketch comes out a little bit different, so you can adjust those as needed. And lastly, and even more importantly, is to make sure that you click the button that says ignore white. And this is going to make sure that anything in this box that was white doesn't actually show up as a shape, because before then it was actually showing up as a shape. You may not be able to see it because there's a white background, but now it's just going to show up as the black letters. So now we can exit out of this image trace panel, Now, as you can see, it's still showing up in a box, and we can't really do anything at this moment with the individual letters and changing the colors or anything. So how you can do that is by then going up towards the image trace panel box, and then right next to it, you'll see the button expand. So you'll click that, and it will actually get rid of that box and only select the things that are included in the image trace. And it's still connected, however. So if I click it once, it's going to select everything. And what you can do is then go to the menu bar at the top and go to Object and then Ungroup, or Command Shift G or Control Shift G for the keyboard shortcuts. And as you can see now, they are all separated as their individual shapes. And you can see we have this small little piece. Anything that is extra, you can just delete. And as you can see, we have our image traced sketch now, and you can go ahead and change the color with it and do a lot of different things now with it being expanded and ungrouped. To give an example, let's just click and drag over the whole thing and then let go to select it all, and then go up to the top left corner and select the color palette, and then you could just select the color you want, or you could just double click on the swatch in the bottom or the left side of the toolbar, and you could select your own color. So I'm going to go back to the swatches, and I'm just going to click a green color, and you can see that the whole lettering is now a different color, and I could even just select different letters and change it to different colors. But I'm going to go back. So let's just say I like it like that, and we're going to just adjust it. You could move it around. And if you don't want them to be movable by themselves, you can then go ahead and select it all after you've changed it, and go to Object and then Group it. So whenever you select it, it's going to move move together rather than by itself. Now if we zoom in on this, we can see that it has that organic feel to it because it's very rough, and you can see it has that hand-drawn texture to it. And if you're going for that, then this image trace is going to work perfectly for that, because it's going to preserve a lot of those details. However, if you want it a little bit more clean without doing the actual using the pen tool, you can select the direct selection tool and then select a shape by itself, and then go over to the tools panel where it says the shaper tool and just click and hold on that, and it'll bring out some other tools that you can use, and then select the smooth tool. And you could go back and make sure that that shape is selected. Select the smooth tool, and then we could zoom in to that shape. And where it is bumpy that we want to smooth out, we can just click and drag along that edge all the way toward until that curve is done. And then you can see it gets rid of a lot of those anchor points, and it's a much smoother edge to it. But you can see that sometimes it's going to leave these little breaks, and what you can do is either run through the smooth tool again over that area, or if it happens to keep doing it, you can just select it. We zoom in a little bit more, and then you can press either the minus key, or you can go to the tool panel where it says pen tool, and then click and hold on it and get delete anchor point tool. And then you could select these little anchor points that you want to get rid of. And if you go back to that pen tool and click and hold and click the anchor point tool converter, then you can edit these points by themselves by clicking and dragging and reshaping that anchor point. Or if you just want to keep it how it was, you can just undo that. And so it's looking a little bit smoother, and you could do that to all these edges by just simply clicking on them by using the direct selection tool and then the smooth tool to smooth out these edges and get rid of those unnecessary anchor points to smooth out the edges. So as you can see, it's looking a little bit better. And if you want to get rid of these white spots, just click on the shape again with the direct selection tool. Go back to that delete anchor point tool, which is you can get to by using the minus key on your keyboard, or just going to the pen tool and clicking and holding on it and then clicking the delete anchor point tool. And then just click on these anchor points until the shape is gone. And you don't want to select any of these anchor points and then just hit the delete key, because what that will do is it will actually break the path to where, as you can see, it's creating these sharp edges and it's not looking too good. So what you want to do is just use that delete anchor point tool to delete any of these anchor points. So let's say that that's pretty good as far as the live trace or the image trace, and we can go ahead and select this design again. Now if you want to create a drop shadow for your geofilter, just select it and go to the menu bar to where it says Effect, select that, go to Stylize, and then Drop Shadow. And you could then click Preview to see what the drop shadow will look like. And I like to keep the drop shadow around 50% in opacity, and then have the X and Y offset set to 0 just to have an even amount of contrast around all the edges of the geofilter. And then the blur can be set to whatever you like, but the smaller is going to mean a smaller file size, and these drop shadows tend to take up a little bit extra file size. So I'm going to go ahead and change the opacity to around 65% just to help you see the drop shadow a little bit better, and then click OK. And then I'm going to change the color to white, so then you can see how it's sort of going to look with having a drop shadow and having a white color. And finally, if you want to create a quick border around your vector art, what you can do is then go ahead and select it, and then go over to the Pathfinder panel on the right side of your screen. If you don't happen to see it, you can go ahead to Window and then find Pathfinder and select it. And then select the first icon, which is going to be the Unite option. And that's going to unite all these figures together. And then go over to the swatches in the tool panel, and you'll see the white is our fill, and then you'll see another one that says stroke. And so we'll want to select that one, and you could go ahead and pick your own color from this color picker, or in the top left corner you should see a drop down menu of different swatches of colors you can use. So I'm going to click a dark color like this dark green, and then go to the stroke option right next to it, which is going to control the stroke weight. And I'm going to put this up to about 10. And as you can see, as we're increasing this, it's starting to eat into the inside of our design, and that's not something we want. So we're going to close that color picker, select the vector artwork, and then go to the stroke color panel, or the stroke panel. And you will see that there's the align stroke option, and right now it's set to center, so that now it's going inside of the design, but what you can do is set the stroke to the outside, and that's going to set the stroke to make sure that it doesn't go on the inside and only creates that outside one. And as you can see, where there's a little bit of the bumpy paths and anchor points, it's going to create sharp borders as well. So you're going to go ahead and get the delete anchor point tool and go ahead and delete those to smooth it out. And you can do that for all these as well. And just continue to do that. You could also do the smooth tool as well that we did earlier. And so that's just a quick way to do it. And in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how you can do this with using the pen tool, which is going to help create precise shapes with very fine amount of detail. And finally, if you want to fix up that border a little bit more, you could go to the layers and then add another layer behind everything else, and then go to the left toolbar, and what you can find is under the paintbrush, you click and hold and find this blob brush tool, which is similar to the paintbrush, and then switch this out to where you go to the second layer, and then you can draw within these little areas that probably should use a little bit of filling in because it's creating a little bit of that disconnection to where it's not very harmonious. So we'll make things a little bit more similar by drawing behind it. We could fill in these as well. And because this is behind everything, it's not going to go on top of this white. See, if I do this, it's not going to go on top, it's just going to go behind. You could do the same thing here. So once you're done, you could then zoom out to make sure that it's what you're looking for, and then go ahead and go to File, and then save this as your geofilter. Click OK, and then what you can do is to get the geofilter file, you can go to File, Export, and then Save for Web, and then change the file format to PNG24. Make sure that transparency is selected. You can also click and drag down to Z your geofilter, and then make sure the width is 1080 and the height is 1920 and the percent is 100%, and then go ahead and click Save. Save to your desktop again, and it should be a PNG. You can go over to the desktop, and it should be a geofilter file ready to go as a PNG. However, if you happen to have Photoshop, what I like to do is just go to Photoshop, and then we can then go ahead and open that actual Illustrator file. And then if you open it as media box, default, I think it is bounding box, but you want to make sure that it's a media box so it includes the complete artboard. And so what you can do is then it's going to be a little bit larger than normal. I like to reset it to 1080, and it should go back to 1920 for the height. Resolution should be 300, and I select OK. And then go to File, Export, and then Export As. And then it'll bring out this box, dialog box, and you could choose PNG, transparency, make sure those two are selected, and then you could select your width to be 1080, height 1920, and then make sure everything's correct. It should looks good, so we'll hit export all, and then we'll save over that past PNG, and then we can go back and open that up again, and it's this similar file, just a PNG 24, and that's what you would submit to Snapchat. So that's how you can digitize your geofilter using the image trace functionality within Adobe Illustrator in order to maintain a lot of that organic style as well as the hand-drawn nature of your geofilter sketch. So in the next lesson, we're going to learn how you can digitize your geofilter in Adobe Illustrator using the pen tool in order to achieve a more precise and clean look and feel.